All right, welcome back to Fantasy Al Dente, the live streaming show brought to you by Sports Al Dente. We are your recipe for your fantasy lineup. Josh Ummer, good morning, good afternoon. How are you doing?
Great.
Ready for football, man. I'm all
Excellent.
set.
Week 13, we are pretty much in every league unless you have a very strange format. This is the last week before playoffs. Crazy, we're here already. I feel like we just started the season.
Yeah, I agree. It's nuts. I've been waiting. You wait so long during the off season for football, and you get so excited. Now where'd the time go?
Yeah, it's like it's like Christmas all in a season. It just it's that countdown, and then it just over like that. I don't know how your guys' leagues are. I am on the fringe in all three of mine. I'm literally in a win and in scenario. So this is a big day for me. This is a very big day for me. Are you guys playoffs? How's the outlook looking over there, Ummer?
Well, I play in a couple of leagues. One, I'm pretty much assured a playoff spot. I have a pretty stacked roster. The other one, I actually have a very crucial game this week. I'm going up against another guy who's 6-6. I'm 6-6. It's for that fourth playoff seed, so it's a very crucial game this week. So we'll see
Yes.
how it goes.
Well, good
We'll see
luck,
how it goes.
Josh. How about yourself?
Thank you, sir.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, good luck, Umar. Hope you're winning in. I in my big league, I'm guaranteed a playoff spot just playing for seeding, and in my
Okay.
other dynasty league, I'm winning in as well. So
Well, hey, that's a. I think it's a testament, and why this show actually is useful is that all of us are either already in or in a win-and-in scenario. There's no bottom feeders, so it shows we know a
Nope.
little bit what we're talking about. So that's good. That's good.
right.
Well done, boys. Well done. Let's get into our how we do the show here. We do a little DFS for you, brought to you by DraftKings. Where I'm going to go ahead and put all those lineups up on social media. If you've watched the show before, those will be up on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, so you can check those out. We kind of break them down a little bit. So if you want to get a last-minute DFS lineup before kickoff, we'll do that. We're going to go over some hits and misses from last week, just so you know we kind of hold ourselves accountable. That's what we do here. And lastly, getting into our well, no, I guess not lastly. Then getting into our starts and sits for the week that we like and don't like, and then finally we'll answer some questions. So let's get right into DFS. Ummer, we're going to start with you. What is your DFS lineup brought to you by DraftKings? You can see it right here on the screen.
Yes, sir. So at quarterback, I got Patrick Mahomes versus the Raiders. With the news of Kareem Hunt this whole week, I expect the Chiefs to be more passing friendly this week, so I like Patrick Mahomes. Running back, I got Tariq Cohen versus the Giants and Philip Lindsay versus the Bengals. Jumping into the receivers, Keenan Allen versus the Steelers. DJ Moore has slowly become a very productive receiver in that Carolina offense, so I like him versus the Buccaneers this week. Tyler Lockett versus the Niners. Jumping in tight end, I got Rob Gronkowski versus the Vikings. I know he's been hurt and he's not been the same Rob Gronkowski we've been used to, but like I said, he's been hurt and finally he's healthy. He had a great game against the Jets, and I expect him to finish the season strong. So I like him against the Vikings. In the flex position, I got Josh Doxson versus the Eagles. Since Colt McCoy has entered into the starting lineup, he's actually been throwing to the receivers a lot more often than Alex Smith was. And Josh Doxson had 10 targets last week. So I expect Josh Doxson to have a good week against the Eagles. Eagles defense has been littered with injuries. So Josh Doxson should have a pretty good game this week. And for defense, should be like your steal of the week as far as DFS is concerned. 2,600 for the Rams defense against the Lions. So that was almost like a lock for my lineup this week. So Rams against the Lions, 2,600. That's for sure what's going to be my defense this week.
There you go. And yeah, Doxson could definitely be a very good steal with those 10 targets last week. I'm sure Josh is yelling at the screen, so I at least need to mention show our scoreboard. Josh has taken a commanding lead, 3-0 to 1. So me and Ummer playing a little catch up. We'll do all right. But speaking of Josh, we'll get into your lineup. Go right ahead. Boast a little bit.
No need to boast. Last week actually was really close between us. If anyone was following
It
Ryan,
was our closest week. Yeah.
yeah, amongst all three of us. And then
Yeah.
just unfortunately going into the last game, both Ryan and I had DeAndre Hopkins, so there was no way for him to overtake me.
Yeah,
But it ended up a very close
I
game.
think you beat me by what, 1.8 or something like that?
Yeah, it was something. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
very close.
Well, touche.
So for this week, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna save some money at quarterback, and I'm gonna go Baker Mayfield. He's got a tough matchup against Houston. I know that their defense, they got Clowney on one end and Watt on the other, but I think they can be exploited by by passing the deep ball and passing over the middle. If Baker can stand and take that pass rush, I think he'll be able to do well. He's on a roll. He's throwing multiple touchdowns for the past like 5-6 weeks in a row. He's really coming into his own. So I trust in Baker to continue, and they're definitely gonna have to throw the ball to match Houston's 8-game win streak. They've been putting points on the board with DeAndre Hopkins, Lamar Miller, that 97-yard or 96-yard run last week. That was fantastic. So I expect that Cleveland's going to be playing catch up, and I expect them to be throwing the ball. At running back this week, I'm just going to pay up. I'm going to go Christian McCaffrey. DraftKings is a full PPR format, so give me Christian McCaffrey. Don't have to go too in depth there. He's a must play in PPR formats if you can afford him. Running back, I'm going to go get Spencer Ware. I'm sure by now everyone in the fantasy football community has heard about the Kareem Hunt situation. Spencer Ware is going to step into a fantastic opportunity. He has not been priced accordingly. He's still very cheap. As of this morning, he's only $4,000. So, I mean, that price point for the opportunity to be a starting running back in the Chiefs offense, easy ad. Wide receiver, because we saved some money at running back, we're going to pay up a little. I'm going to go Devontae Adams. Packers have to run the table. Rodgers said so. I expect him to be throwing the ball. I'm going to go Juju Smith-Schuster. Big game this week. Chargers, Pittsburgh. Juju has quietly been a better option than Antonio Brown this year in that offense, except for the touchdowns. Brown has a lot more touchdowns than Smith-Schuster, but Smith-Schuster is getting so many more targets. I expect that, Brown is aging a little bit. Schuster is coming in to his own. I think there may be a shift there. If it hasn't already happened, it will be soon. I expect Juju to be the number one option in that offense going forward in a must-win game. Pittsburgh Chargers, I expect him to do really well. I'm going to get DJ Moore as my last receiver. Again, similar situation. DJ Moore, rookie, young guy. He's kind of taken over in that offense as the best option. They're playing Tampa Bay, horrible pass defense. I expect all of Carolina fantasy options to do really well this week. Tight end, Eric Ebron. Jack Doyle's out. He's on IR. That opens the door for Ebron, who has had success even with Doyle there. We had been saying to sit Ebron a lot because of the volume concerns. Well, those volume concerns are gone. No Doyle. Ebron, easy play. And at flex, I'm going to go Chris Connolly. Sammy Watkins is out of the game, and I expect Chris Connolly to step up and basically play the Sammy Watkins role in that offense. We had to find a little bit of a cheaper option because we spent up at wide receiver with Devontae Adams, Juju Smith-Schuster, Christian McCaffrey at running back. So Chris Connolly, if you have to save some money, under $4,000, really cheap option at a flex with a lot of boom potential. And lastly, Eagles defense, a little bit of an odd choice, but I think they're playing in prime time. Dallas is now 2 games ahead, and if they lose this game, they're really, really far behind. If they want any shot to make the last game of the season, Dallas Eagles division, possible game for the division, they have to win this week. They can't fall 3 games behind. So I think that they step up against Washington with Colt McCoy, and they play really well.
Yeah, that should be a good game, actually. Probably one of the lesser primetime games we've seen, but actually will be a lot of implications on the line for both teams. Love the McCaffrey pick. Had him originally. It was just a little pricey, so I ended up changing him out of mine. So we'll get into mine. I went Jared Goff at quarterback. He was a full, I believe, like 1,200 less than Patrick Mahomes. So I just thought for the type of offense they run, like I'll save a little there and go with him. You mentioned the Kareem Hunt situation. Obviously, horrible situation going on there. But strictly fantasy speaking, as you mentioned, it's too hard to pass on Spencer Ware for 4,000. I think the temperament on him in other leagues, in actual weekly leagues, if you have playoffs on the line, we'll get into it later. Me personally, I have him in a few. I'm not playing him. I think the temperament needs to be held back or held in check a little bit there. But in DFS for $4,000, you can't say no to that. I got Phillip Lindsay going against the Bengals. Bengals defense is a mess right now. Lindsay's been one of the hottest not only running backs, but just players in the NFL. I think he continues that this week, and they utilize him even more in the offense they have in weeks past. Michael Crabtree, he's a tough one with Lamar Jackson now coming up. Just the passing game is really not what it is. However, I believe he did fall into the end zone last week. I think he gets another red zone opportunity this week, so maybe he can save face a little bit there. And he was another cheap option for me because I went a little expensive at the receiver position. As you see, I have Sanders as well. Weak Bengals secondary. Sanders has had a great season, kind of really not mentioned much, but I believe he's a top 10 receiver, so he's having a really good year. So went Sanders there. Robert Woods against the Lions. He's kind of my favorite fantasy Rams receiver that doesn't really get talked about much. Everyone talks about, Gurley at running back and Brandon Cooks, but Woods is having quietly a very good year as well. Josh, you mentioned it last week. I'm sick of messing around at tight end. We're going Zach Ertz, spending up a little bit there. Just give me my 6 to 8 receptions and possibly a touchdown. I'll take that all day at the tight end. At flex, I got my most expensive player actually, Keenan Allen against the Steelers. Big game this week with the Chargers and Steelers. I think it's a AFC. Obviously, the Chargers are behind the Chiefs for that division, but it could have some seeding implications there with this game here. And Umar, you mentioned it. Rams at 2,600. Yeah, they gave up a boatload of points to the Chiefs a couple weeks ago, but they still had 2 touchdowns, had 6 turnovers, had a very solid fantasy production. And the Lions are, that offense is kind of a wreck right now. So I love the Rams this week for 2,600. So there you have it, the winning lineup. As I say every week, it's only happened once, but I think this is the week it's going to continue. So, well, there's your DFS brought to you by DraftKings. Thank you, gentlemen, for that. As I mentioned, I'll get those all up on on all of our socials, so you can look at those over about an hour and 10 minutes till kickoff. So you got plenty of time to get in a couple money leagues and hopefully win some coin. If you use one of our lineups, let us know who's you use. We love it. Team Josh, Team Ummer, Team Ryan. Well, we can do this Twilight Saga thing and pick teams. That'd be fun.
Even if you don't use the roster, just vote whether you like it, don't like it, whatever.
Yeah, there you go.
Let us know how you feel.
Yeah, you don't have to be married to it. Just maybe pick and choose what you like from each. But well, fellas, let's get into some hits and misses from last week. We like to hold each other accountable. Except for me, I'm the host, so I don't have to hold myself accountable. I'm not giving any hits or misses. It's on you guys. So, Ummer, we'll start with you. Give me some 3 hits and some 3 misses.
Sure. So me and Josh both talked up Lamar Jackson, and he had himself a pretty good game, 20.2 fantasy points in standard PPR leagues. I had him as a start, so he had a great week. I hit on Michael Crabtree. I mean, I know he only scored 11.1 points. He had that touchdown, the fluke touchdown, but I said against the Raiders that he would have a surprisingly good week, and that touchdown definitely bailed me out a little bit. My also start that I mentioned, Kyle Rudolph against the Packers in week 2, he had a great week. In last week, week 12 against the Packers, he also had a substantial week, 13.3 points in standard PPR scoring. So those would be 3 of my starts that 3 of my hits, that I hit on. Some of my misses, though, I said start Andy Dalton. He ended up having only 8.1 standard fantasy points, and he also got hurt and is on the IR now, so that was a pretty bad miss for me. I said sit Chris Carson. He ended up scoring 14.3 fantasy points of standard PPR scoring. And then I also said, I think a lot of us said sit Eric Ebron because of Jack Doyle, but he ended up going off 21.5 fantasy points in standard PPR scoring. So not too bad.
Yeah, that old Ebron guy just loves making us experts not look so expert. So thank you, Ummer. Josh, your hits and misses.
Sure, thanks, Ryan. My hits last week, I would say I hit on. I suggested David Njoku at the tight end position. Njoku did well, even if he was had a little help from his teammates on that one touchdown. He was essentially carried into the end zone.
It's a team game.
He ended up with 5 for 63 and a touchdown, so we'll take that at tight end all day. DJ Moore, another one who I've been talking up week after week. He was 8 for 91. Didn't get in the end zone, but I mean, in PPR formats, that's 17 points. You'll take that. Standard league, 9.1 points. It's not bad. And Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb had 84 yards and 2 total touchdowns, and one of the greatest catches from a running back you will ever see. Just right over top of the dude, fell back in the end zone. They reviewed it. A little bit questionable, but they ultimately ruled it a touchdown. So go Nick Chubb.
Yeah.
Some of my misses from last week were Jordan Howard. Jordan Howard only had 13 total yards. He had such an easy matchup and he still couldn't get it done. So I'll get into that later in my sits for this week. Mark Ingram. Mark Ingram only had 52 yards last week. Mark Ingram really let me down also. He as well had a matchup that I thought he'd be able to thrive in. The Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara, 1-2 punch. Sometimes it's great for NFL. It's great for the Saints. Not so great for fantasy. So a little bit of a miss on Mark Ingram. And Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd proved me wrong. I always say sit Andy Dalton without AJ Green, and I was a little bit down on Boyd as well, I think, due to the matchup. But he ended up with 7 for 85 and a touchdown. So, Tyler Boyd can get it done. Now, I don't know if he'll continue to get it done with Dalton on IR, but he certainly proved me wrong last week.
Yeah, I guess someone has to have some production in that offense at some point, but we can get into that later.
Maybe.
Quick, a couple injury notes for this week. Gus Edwards, running back for Baltimore, is in. Marlon Mack is in. Kiki Kute is out. Devin Funches, is in, but he should be limited. And then Danny Amendola is out. I don't know if you guys have any other big injury news. I know Stephon Diggs, his knees swelled up a little bit overnight, so he's back as questionable. I'm sure he'll end up going. I don't know how limited or whatnot he'll be, but I'm sure. Usually that's one of those precautionary things, but I'm sure he'll be fine. So as far as I'm concerned, I think he'll be a full go. So, if not, we'll get right into it. Let's get into quarterbacks. Give me some quarterbacks you're loving this week.
Sure. So my first one's going to be a little bit controversial, but Josh Allen versus the Dolphins.
Oh.
In his 2 games that he's had 2 double-digit points. Yes, I know it's only 2 in a 12-week span, but the reason that he had double-digit fantasy points is because he had double-digit rushing attempts. So if he could find a way to move out of the pocket and become more mobile, I think that'll help him beat the Dolphins. And, Josh Allen was, a first-round pick for a reason. I mean, he has the talent. He still has to develop his accuracy a little bit. We'll see what happens there. But against the Dolphins, who started as a great defense but have now started to slide a lot, I like Josh Allen versus the Dolphins. That should be a pretty good matchup for him. My other start that I like is Chase Daniel versus the Giants. Last week on Thanksgiving, he played pretty well in a spot start for Mitchell Trubisky. So against the Giants, I expect him to play just as well. I mean, there's a reason that Chase Daniel played well as well. He backed up Drew Brees for most of his life. Then he went to Kansas City and backed up Alex Smith. I know it's not Drew Brees level, but he still played against a very capable veteran quarterback. He went back for 1 year with New Orleans, and then now he signed with the Bears. So, I mean, he has a lot of knowledge base to go off of and confidence. So I like Chase Daniel versus the Giants. And once again, I'm going to hit the same note, but Lamar Jackson, I think this guy, as long as he's playing in this offense, this is going to be a more dynamic offense going forward into 2019 and forward for the Baltimore Ravens. And against the Falcons with such a porous defense, I expect him to run roughshod through them, pass on him. I mean, he could do whatever he wants against them. So I like Lamar Jackson a lot.
Yeah, I think I could be mistaken, but didn't Chase Daniels also back up Carson Wentz for a year, his rookie year?
He had a cup of coffee with the Eagles, so yeah, he played with Carson Wentz and also Nick Foles. So you're completely right.
I believe the Eagles were the one that signed him to that ridiculous 3-year, $24 or $22 million contract just to be a backup. So that's a nice lucrative backup deal. Yeah. So all right, Josh, who are your quarterbacks you're loving this week? You're loving on.
Thanks, Ryan. I'm going to agree completely with Ummer on Lamar Jackson. Love Lamar Jackson this week. Lamar Jackson, just with his rushing numbers alone, would be enough to be like a top 12 fantasy running back, honestly, most weeks. So you add that in with his passing, which he needs to work on his passing. His passing numbers by themselves are a little subpar, but the rushing provides an excellent floor. So I agree with Ummer completely that I love Lamar Jackson this week and going forward, as long as he's the starter. As I mentioned in the DFS segment, I love Baker Mayfield this week. He's really coming along the way you'd expect a number 1 overall pick to do. It's been 5 straight weeks that he's thrown multiple touchdowns in a game. I expect that to continue. I think Houston's a great defense. It will be a little bit of a test for him. The schedule's been fairly kind the past few weeks, but now they will face Houston. So we will get to see a little bit of what Baker's made of in this matchup, but I think he'll pass the test, and I think he'll do really well this week. I expect him to be a fringe quarterback 1, but he has the upside to finish in the top 5, top 6 similar to how we did last week. The last guy that I really like this week is Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck's been on such a hot streak, and the Jags defense aren't what they were last year. It's not a scary matchup anymore. And the last time Andrew Luck threw for less than 3 touchdowns was week 3. Less than 3 touchdowns, meaning he's thrown for 3 or more every week since week 3. Andrew Luck has been on fire. I think he's one of the hottest players in the NFL right now as far as consistency goes and high ceilings. So give me Andrew Luck this year, this week rather.
Yeah, I don't think there's definitely not a quarterback. I don't think other than Patrick Mahomes maybe, but there's not been a player hotter than Andrew Luck. So he's been playing lights out. Josh, we'll just stay with you with some quarterbacks you are not loving on. Who's not hot?
Sure. So we're gonna sit Matthew Stafford this week, and in the past 5 weeks, his touchdown to interception ratio is 1-to-1. You can't have that. You can't have a guy throwing a pick for every touchdown he throws. Marvin Jones is on IR. He's lost another weapon between Golden Tate, now Marvin Jones, coming up against a Rams defense, which you guys mentioned also in the DFS segment. Their defense is excellent. It's just a horrible spot for Stafford, and I wouldn't trust him if I need a player to push me in the playoffs in Week 13, and let alone in the actual playoffs. So for me, I'm done with Stafford for the rest of Fantasy 2018. I'm also done with, for this particular week, I'm not going to start Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan has actually been great for fantasy owners this year. He was one of the players I was thankful for when we did our little Thanksgiving segment there. He's been great. Right. But over the past 3 weeks, not so much. He's only thrown for 5 touchdowns in the past 3 weeks while committing 4 turnovers. So, that's pretty close to that 1-to-1 ratio you want to avoid right there. He's going against a tough Ravens defense. They've only allowed 220 yards per game to quarterbacks. That's not what you want. Ryan is still very talented. They still have a lot of playmakers around him, but they've been essentially eliminated from the playoffs. When that happens, players sometimes don't, give it their full effort. I'm not necessarily doubting anyone's ability or motivation, but being eliminated from the playoffs, and they're playing against a team, the Ravens, who are still fighting for the playoffs, their defense is arguably their best asset. I just think it's a bad spot for Matt Ryan this week, so I would stay away from him. And lastly, I would stay away from Carson Wentz. Here are some numbers on Carson Wentz that are very interesting. 752 yards, 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Those are Wentz's numbers over the last 3 weeks since coming off the Eagles' bye week. Normally players go into their bye week, they take some time to rest, they game plan, they come out of the bye, and they tend to play a little bit better for the next upcoming week or two because they've prepared more. They've had some time to rest their bodies. Wentz has actually played worse after the bye for whatever reason. It could be his knee acting up. He's certainly mobile in the pocket, but he hasn't been putting up the rushing numbers that he used to put up. So if he's throwing for numbers like 752 over 3 games, 3 touchdowns to 4 interceptions, that's less than the 1-to-1 ratio, meaning he's more likely to throw an interception than a touchdown. So I can't start Carson Wentz in that situation. Unfortunately, without the rushing yards, I can't trust him to be a top 12 quarterback. He's still a good NFL quarterback. I expect the Eagles to win the game, but not good enough to be a top 12 for fantasy.
So let me ask you this, because luckily for me, I have Wentz and Ryan, so both on your sits. Who do you like at it? If I have to start those two, I'm not at this point. I'm not dropping someone to stream a no name like a Case Keenum. I can't do that against those two guys. Who are you starting out of those two? If I have to, who am I starting?
I would start Ryan out of those two, just based on the matchup, because the Ravens' defense, their pass defense is good, but their rush defense is also excellent. And sneak peek when we get to the sits, I really don't like Tevin Coleman this week. Mm-hmm. So if Atlanta is going to put up any points, it's going to be through Matt Ryan.
Okay, so.
See, that's funny because I actually prefer Carson Wentz in that situation because, as you mentioned, the Eagles have something to fight for still. They're 2 games back in that division, so I expect Carson Wentz to actually amp it up and play a little bit better against Washington in order to stay in that division hunt and stay in the playoff race. And I know that he hasn't looked that great off the bye week, but if you throw out that New Orleans game, that absolute anomaly of a game that the Eagles played, I think Carson Wentz still has the ability, and maybe it's not the same Carson Wentz that we saw last year, his MVP form season, but Yeah, I think the biggest thing is just because they're still in the playoff hunt, they're playing Washington. He has so many weapons there. I think it's just I prefer Carson Wentz in that situation over Matt Ryan. So I know it's tough for you, Ryan, to make a decision now with both of us being contrarian here, but
Yeah, appreciate it,
yeah,
guys. Thank you. Thanks for the uniformity there. I think though, what as you mentioned about Wentz, though, it's one of those we know what type of quarterback he is. We know how athletic he is, and he's got to bounce out of it at some point, I would think. And maybe this division game would be it. However, as you mentioned, Josh, I hate the matchup. I hate both the matchups. So either way, I'm probably just gonna flip a coin. You know, what do I know?
Yeah, no, Umar made some great points there, and I agree. I expect the Eagles to play up. That's why I was starting their defense in DFS. So I could definitely see that scenario panning out. I don't disagree with any of that. I just between those two, I would just lean Ryan because he's been better so far this year. Anyway.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thanks. Appreciate that. Umar, who are your sits?
So Josh actually covered a couple of mine. I also don't like Matt Ryan versus the Ravens, and I don't like Matt Stafford for the rest of 2018 either. The only one I'll add in is any Jets quarterback. I know Sam Darnold was questionable coming into this week. I think he was finally ruled out, so Josh McCown is going to play this week. But either quarterback, I don't like them against the Titans. I think they're still in a playoff hunt as well, so the Titans are going to be playing well, and the Jets offense has been a complete mess. So avoid that quarterback situation. And even though I like Josh Doxson in my DFS lineup, I'm not too sold on Colt McCoy. I think he'll play well, but not well enough where if you insert him into your starting roster, you'll have a good week, especially with no teams on a bye week now. You don't have to worry about starting a Colt McCoy. So unless you're in a 20-team league or whatever it is. So, but yeah, I'd avoid Colt McCoy in your starting lineup. I think he'll have a good week, like I said, but just not like fantasy worthy of a start. So
Yeah, I would hope. I'm in one league that's a 2 quarterback league, and someone's starting Jeff Driscoll this week, so that should be fun.
that should be very
Yeah,
interesting.
that's what it changes when you have that. I don't know if you guys have ever played a 2 quarterback league, but it changes stuff so much up, especially in the draft. People are taking 4 quarterbacks in the draft, which I mean makes sense, and you want to hog some of those. So well, anyway, moving on. Let's get to running backs. Umar, we'll stay with you. Who are some hot running backs you're liking this week?
Sure. So I got a bit of a lottery ticket play, Justin Jackson versus the Steelers. I know everybody is gung-ho on Austin Eckler, and I expect him to have a really great game too. But after Melvin Gordon got hurt, Justin Jackson actually got more rushing attempts and more rushing yards compared to Austin Eckler. So I know Austin Eckler will get utilized a lot more in the passing game, but as far as the rushing game is concerned, I expect Justin Jackson to actually get more carries and could possibly lead to a red zone touchdown. So I actually like Justin Jackson this week, but both plays are solid. So, yeah, so Justin Jackson versus the Steelers and Chris Thompson, Washington running back. He's actually finally healthy now. So I like him against the Eagles. The Eagles have surprisingly allowed the 4th most receptions to running backs. So I expect Chris Thompson to actually have a pretty good game. Colt McCoy will probably have to dump off to Chris Thompson a few times with the injuries that they suffered on their offensive line. I know we bring it up every week, but it is a big deal when you lose starting offensive linemen. So that definitely affects your game plan. So Chris Thompson should get a heavy workload, I like to think. And I know we keep mentioning every time, but Philip Lindsay, I mean, that guy has been one of the most underrated fantasy players this week. I don't think enough people talk about him enough. And because I think the reason that they drafted Royce Freeman, he overshadowed the fact that Philip Lindsay got drafted by that team. But just Philip Lindsay has definitely far and wide outplayed Royce Freeman. So I definitely like him against the Bengals. Ryan, I think you mentioned it. The Bengals defense is just a complete mess, so he should have a very solid game.
Yeah, Lindsey's just been a revelation all around, fantasy-wise, just for the Broncos in general. We saw in Week 3 when he was ejected during that Ravens game just how that offense really lost a spark without him. So he's a key to that offense and definitely been great for all those fantasy players that picked him up on waivers after the draft. So, Josh, some hot running backs you got? Any different ones?
Thanks. Real quick before I go into that, I just want to mention to anyone who may or may not be using Stephon Diggs, Adam Schefter, while we were doing the show, just tweeted out apparently that his knee swelled overnight, and now he has to determine pregame. He's got to test it to see whether or not he can give it a go. He's been downgraded back to questionable. So for anyone that's going to rely on Diggs, just a little bit of a note there. Just tweeted out while we were live. Running backs that I like this week, Aaron Jones. Real big on Aaron Jones this week. I think he's a pretty much a starter now. Doesn't need too much of an explanation there. But the Cardinals, they've allowed the second most fantasy points per game to running backs. They've also allowed the most touchdowns, 16. And I expect this to be an Aaron Jones game. You know, Rodgers and the Packers, they may even run up the score a little bit in this one just to be absolutely certain. I expect it to be a potentially they could get up into the 30s and then just sit on Aaron Jones for the entire second half. So I expect him to have a really good game this week. Gus Edwards, of course. You know, we're going to keep riding the Gus bus here. Back-to-back weeks, over 100 yards rushing. Downgrade him a little bit in PPR. He hasn't really been catching many balls. He's only caught one, honestly, the entire season, and none since he became the feature back. But in standard leagues, he's a shoe-in start, over 100 yards. Mobile running back with a mobile quarterback is a great recipe there. And lastly, Austin Eckler. With the Melvin Gordon injury, he's got an excellent opportunity ahead of him. Eckler is really valuable in PPR leagues. He had 10 catches last week, and I expect him to have maybe not 10 this week, but a good portion of catches this week against the Steelers in that really important matchup. So start Austin Eckler.
Yeah, he could very well have more than 10, considering he got those 10 after Gordon went out in the early second half, I believe. So
yeah.
Great. Well, Josh, stay with you. Who's some running backs you're not liking this week?
Sure. We're going to sit Adrian Peterson this week. You know, he hasn't been as efficient as he was to start the season. In his last 4 games, he only posted double-digit fantasy points one time. The Eagles defense has been poor lately, but they do have a good rush defense. And Peterson just hasn't been himself. It's the later portion of the season. It's getting colder out. He is older for a running back, so I think he may be starting to slow down. And just that Washington offense in general, I really don't want anything to do with. Pardon me. So sit Adrian Peterson. As I mentioned earlier, Tevin Coleman. I want to sit Tevin Coleman. There's almost no situation where I would start him. You could find someone to pick up probably off waivers that I'd rather start over Tevin Coleman. He has only 27 touches in the past 3 weeks. You know, the Ravens secondary is one of the best, pardon me, the Ravens' front seven is one of the best in the entire league. And Coleman's been very efficient on his touches, you know, but back-to-back weeks, he only has 8 rushes a game. I mean, that's not going to get it done. You know, volume. Fantasy football is about volume, and he's only getting 8 rushes. You can't rely on that. So keep me away from Tevin Coleman.
Yeah.
Lastly, Jordan Howard, I'm done with you. It's over. No more Jordan Howard. I can't do it anymore, guys. He's been breaking my heart constantly. In the early portion of the season, whenever I would start him, he would do nothing. So I would sit him. Then he would blow up on my bench. And then I'd go, oh, okay, that's right. He's good. Let's start him again. And then he would do nothing. You know, I don't know what it is. I don't know if he's not a fit in the Nagy offense. Maybe he needs to go to a new team. Maybe they need to rework their scheme. But I don't think they're going to rework their scheme because they're winning. So, you know, they need to use Howard. They need to find a better way to use Howard or trade him to another team that'll be able to use him better so they can get something that actually works. Because right now, in that offense, Jordan Howard doesn't work.
Yeah, maybe he offended Nagy or something in a meeting, or I don't know what happened there. But I have him as well. So I hear you on that. Josh, some other sits for you. Sorry, Josh. Umar, some other sits for you.
Unless Josh has more sits, go for it.
It's still
buddy.
early here in LA. It's still early, you know. I'm only on my second cup of coffee, so.
It's all good. It's all good. Actually, Josh covered all of my sits. We have some sort of Jedi mind meld going on this week, so we're getting lots of similar information going on. So I'll cover a few others that I had. Sonny Michel versus the Vikings. I still think he'll have a pretty good game, but Rex Burkhead is healthy and he'll be returning to the lineup this week, so that maybe clouds up the backfield again. So you got, Rex Burkhead, James White, Sonny Michel. All 3 of those guys are definitely going to be itching for some touches. I know James White will get his workload done through the passing game, but Rex Burkhead and Sonny Michel, they'll be dueling for rushing touches. So it could cloud up the backfield, like I said. I'm not 100% that it will. Sonny Michel has been another revelation in the fantasy world. So, and the Vikings have a really strong rushing defense anyway. So we'll see how that one goes. So just that may be a situation to monitor going forward for sure. Um, Definitely Jordan Howard. I mean, just to touch on it again, Tariq Cohen has 52 more points than Jordan Howard, and I know we mentioned, Josh, you mentioned that Jordan Howard may not be a fit for that system. I think you're absolutely right. I think Jordan Howard is in a contract year, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears let him walk and he signs with another team so they can utilize his abilities a little bit more. Because when Matt Nagy signed with the Bears in the offseason, he said he wanted to use Tariq Cohen in a Tyreek Hill sort of role, which he used obviously Tyreek Hill in Kansas City. So I think Cohen fits his system a little bit more. That's why we're seeing more Tariq Cohen as opposed to Jordan Howard. So unfortunately, similar to Matt Stafford, I don't like Jordan Howard for the rest of 2018 either. So um, yeah, those would be, like I said, Josh covered lots of my sits, so the only one I'll throw out there is Sonny Michelle.
Yeah, well, someone I do want to mention while we're on running backs. Obviously, we mentioned it in DFS. Spencer Ware, with the whole Kareem Hunt thing going on, Spencer Ware is thrust into the starting role. Um, Big week for, as we mentioned, it's last week before playoffs. Do you trust Spencer Ware, or should we temper expectations until we see some of him? Obviously, the Chiefs are playing the Raiders, so you would have expected high fantasy volume from pretty much any Chiefs offensive player. Josh, I'll ask you first. Do you like Spencer this week, or do you want to hold off a week or two?
I love him this week. I love him a lot. He's a top 10 running back for me this week, potentially maybe even top 5, top 6. He's in an amazing situation. That offense, I expect to still to continue the same way it has been. I wouldn't really expect much of a dip in production. He's not as talented, in my opinion, as Kareem Hunt, but I usually tout situation over talent anyway. It's not like he's a bum. He was the starting running back on this team when they drafted Kareem Hunt. Is just unfortunately due to injury, Hunt seized the situation. He took the reins and never gave him back. But I do expect Spencer Ware to do well. I expect him to do very well this week in a great matchup against Oakland. They can't crowd the box against Spencer Ware. Not that they would anyway. I mean, teams are more concerned about Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. So Ware's going to have plenty of room to run. He can catch the ball. He can be a pass-catching running back. I expect him to be just fine.
Yeah. Same sentiment, or?
For the most part, I think especially for this week, I like Spencer Ware. Long-term prospects, I'm not sure about that one. Josh hit the nail on the head where Spencer Ware was a starting running back at one point, and also when they used to have Jamal Charles and they had spot starts where Jamal Charles was hurt, Spencer Ware played well in those games as well. So against Oakland, I see him having a very good game. The only thing that makes me a little bit wary about Spencer Ware this week is that they got the news pretty late. So I don't know if they have to adjust the game plan at all to um, to complement Ware's running style compared to Kareem Hunt's running style. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see. Sorry, Emma, we kind of lost you
I
there on the connection, so I'm gonna cut in
know
real quick.
that they probably since
Uh-oh.
we knew
All right, I'm gonna
since
cut
they
in real
knew
quick.
about the situation.
I think it's a delayed response, so I'll cut in real quick. But yeah, I think Ware should be fine, at least for this week, depending on how you have to start him. So, there you are, Armor. Now you're back. It looks live with us.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a little delayed, I think, trying to play
Sorry.
catch up. You're good. Technology
right.
sometimes it's great these days, but sometimes it delays a little bit. So, well, let's get into receivers. Josh, we'll start with you. Some hot receiver. I'm gonna have you do both. Just roll through them real quick. Some receivers you
Sure.
like, receivers you don't like.
Sure. We'll just go through here. Tyler Lockett, I like a lot this week. Tyler Lockett's been great. Only 1 week all year in PPR has he given you below 10 points. So a great floor with Tyler Lockett. He scored a touchdown in 8 of 11 games. I expect that to keep rolling. I like him a lot. DJ Moore, as I mentioned in the DFS section, since the bye week, Moore is averaging over 5 targets a game. He's got 511 yards in that time, trending in the right direction, gaining chemistry with Cam Newton. Great matchup against Tampa Bay. Start DJ Moore. And lastly, I really like Adam Humphries. He's really come along in the slot for Tampa Bay over the past 7 weeks. He's actually been a top 10 receiver in PPR formats. He's catching a lot of balls. No matter who the quarterback is there, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Jameis from this point out. But no matter who the quarterback is there's a lot of volume for the passing game. And Godwin and Jackson have just been so up and down over the year. Evans has been the most consistent, and Humphries over the past few weeks has been very consistent as well. So if you wanted like a safe wide receiver 2, go with Adam Humphries.
Like it. And your sits?
Sits, I'm going to sit Michael Crabtree. I know that he hit for Ummer last week, and it's not even a knock on him specifically. It's just a knock on the situation in Baltimore. Lamar Jackson, as a passer, I don't trust him yet. Love him as a fantasy quarterback due to his running and passing numbers combined. But the receivers, we don't really know who he likes yet. We don't know who he has chemistry with. He sometimes, it's so funny because he can throw a ball out there and you go, wow, great pass. And then other times he'll throw a ball and you go, how is this guy a quarterback? I think he has to get a little bit more consistent. He's got to mature. I mean, the guy's a rookie. I believe in him, but I'm not going to start his receivers. So no Michael Crabtree for me. No Doug Baldwin for me either. I'm starting Lockett. I'm sitting Baldwin. I think Lockett is emerging as the better receiver in that backfield. Now, I would start Baldwin in PPR leagues if you don't have a better option, because he has caught 17 of 23 targets in the past 3 weeks. Those are generally shorter area targets, though. He's not a deep threat. He hasn't really scored many touchdowns. He only scored 1 touchdown, I believe, in the past 4 weeks. So Baldwin is a sit for me in standard, a start in PPR, but like a weak start, like a wide receiver 3. And Sterling Shepard. He's the last one I want to stay away from. Said it before, I'll say it again. Too many mouths to feed in that Giants offense. And the pecking order goes Odell, Barkley, maybe Shepard, maybe Ingram, whoever else. But with that offensive line, Eli's always under pressure. He doesn't have time to get the ball out very rarely. That was my argument against Evan Ingram a couple weeks back, was that he doesn't have time to go through his progressions to get to Evan Ingram. Sterling Shepard, he's a decent receiver. I like him a lot as a talent, but the Bears, they've only allowed 6.7 yards per attempt to quarterbacks. So if the volume's not there, the fantasy points won't be. Sit him.
Yeah, they're playing tough matchup there, and yeah, I agree there. Ummer, your receiver starts and sits.
Sure. So I'll try and go through these pretty quickly. I also like Adam Humphries. Over the last 5 weeks, he's been averaging 16.64 fantasy points per game. And also, DeSean Jackson is not playing this week, so that raises his stock a little bit too. As I mentioned, Josh Doxson versus the Eagles, that should be a good play. Colt McCoy is finally throwing to his receivers compared to Alex Smith. So Josh Doxson's have a pretty good game. Josh Reynolds versus the Lions. Ever since Cooper Kupp has been out, Josh Reynolds has been a good number 3 receiver there with Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods, obviously. So I like him in a matchup against the Lions where Darius Slay will probably be covering Brandon Cooks and Robert Woods more often. That will leave the secondary to have to deal with Josh Reynolds, and Josh Reynolds has been sneakily good. Mike Williams versus the Steelers. He's definitely started to come on the last few weeks, and Tyrell Williams is questionable coming into this game. So if he plays, I don't know the effectiveness, similar to last week where he did play, but he was I think he ran not too many snaps in that offense anyway. So Mike Williams takes a big boost this week. And David Moore of the Seattle Seahawks. Doug Baldwin and Tyler Lockett are the starting receivers there, but with Richard Sherman in a revenge game, this was originally supposed to be the Sunday night game. Obviously, thanks to the 49ers performance, it got flexed out, but let's not hang on that. So Richard Sherman is going to be amped up for this game, and where he may be able to shut down Tyler Lockett and Doug Baldwin on a good number of snaps, this will leave the secondary to have to deal with the supplemental receivers that CL has. And David Moore has been, one of these where did this guy come from names in fantasy football world. So I expect him to have a pretty good game against the Niners. Maybe not, eye-gouging numbers, but I wouldn't be surprised if he finds the end zone. So that would be my starts. Going into my sits, Calvin Ridley versus the Ravens. I mean, Calvin Ridley has really just fallen off a cliff as far as fantasy performance. He had that excellent week against the Saints. Since then, absolutely nothing. I think he had 1 week against Washington where he played well, but just not consistent enough. And the Ravens have a really strong secondary, so I don't like him this week. Golden Tate versus the Redskins, he has not been getting involved in that offense at all, and it's just interesting to see why they traded for him and then they're not using him. So I still don't like him. It's a very wait and see approach with Golden Tate to see when he finally gets involved. So I don't like him versus the Redskins. I had Kiki QT, but obviously he's out, so definitely don't start him. John Ross versus the Broncos. I know that AJ Green is healthy now, so even if Andy Dalton was playing, John Ross's stock would drop. But the fact that Jeff Driscoll is in, obviously, for the rest of the season, definitely don't like John Ross then for the rest of the season. And here's a surprising name, but Josh Gordon. They traded for him, and he had maybe 1-2 solid weeks ever since the trade, but since then he's been a bit of a ghost in that receiving option. Maybe with the return of Edelman, Tom Brady's obviously going to his favorite target in Julian Edelman, and obviously Rob Gronkowski is now healthy. So Josh Gordon falls third on that pecking order, and they also like to run the ball a lot. So I don't know, like Josh Gordon's stock for the rest of this week. Not just this week, but the rest of the season, excuse me. So we'll see what happens there. But yeah, Josh Gordon against the Vikings. They have a strong secondary as well. Don't like that matchup.
Yeah, we say it a lot with the Giants and other teams, but yeah, just a lot of mouths to feed in New England. So unless you have the guaranteed guys, it's tough to feel confident starting a guy like Gordon. But well, good. Let's get to tight ends, and then we can get into some questions. So
Sure.
tight ends are always quick. Obviously, we talk about it every week. There's the big three, and then after that, quite the drop off. So, Amr, I'll start with you. Anyone besides the big three you like, and who do you dislike?
Sure. So Cameron Brate, I mean, we talked about this last week with OJ Howard going on the IR. He becomes the number one guy, and he always had a good relationship with Jameis Winston, anyways. So against the Panthers, he should have a good week. Here's an interesting name I got for you guys: Jonnu Smith of the Tennessee Titans versus the Jets. 13 receptions off 15 targets since the bye weeks. That's in the last 4 weeks, and he's also had 3 touchdowns in those last 4 weeks as well. Three touchdowns over that 4 week span. Excuse me. So he's actually getting more involved in that passing offense and becoming more of a reliable target for Marcus Mariota. So he's one of the reasons that they've actually been performing pretty well as of late. So Jonnu Smith, there's a sneaky name out there. Ever since they lost Delaney Walker, he's been able to step up finally. I know a lot of people were hoping that he would have done that earlier, but now we're finally seeing Jonnu Smith play well. Going into my sits, Austin Hooper, I think just the Falcons offense, I don't think should play all that well this week against Baltimore Ravens, so I don't like Austin Hooper for that reason. Although I like Kyle Rudolph last week, I don't like him this week against the Patriots. I think he'll get shut down. Jimmy Graham is going to play through the thumb injury, but even with a healthy thumb, he just has not looked good in that Packers offense anyway, so I don't like him versus the Cardinals. Jordan Reed is on the injury report, so I don't like him versus the Eagles. And Ryan, I know you're huge on him, but Gerald Everett, I think he had that 1 week, and I think that was just a fluke week, my friend. So don't like him versus the Lions.
Well, to my defense, I'm not huge on him. I just love that matchup against the Chiefs. I think everyone was going to eat that week. So it's funny. It's funny you mentioned him. I'll ask this quick because we had a question about it. Gerald,
Sure.
if you have to stream one, Gerald Everett or Chris Herndon with the Jets?
That's a tough one. Honestly, though, I'd probably actually go with Gerald Everett because, I mean, we did see it against Kansas City that he was getting involved. I know he only had, I think, 3 targets and 2 of them went for touchdowns, but um, compared to Chris Herndon, especially with Josh McCown coming in the starting lineup, I don't know how involved Chris Herndon would get involved. I know we liked him for a couple weeks earlier in the season, but not consistently. So yeah, surprisingly in that matchup, I'd actually go with Gerald Everett.
Yeah, I think just because of how prolific the Rams' offense is, I would probably
Yes,
agree with you
that's
there.
the big factor
Yeah,
right there.
and
Yeah,
how non-competent the Jets' offense is. So, all right.
100%.
So
Yeah.
yeah, go with Everett over Hernan if you have to stream one of those two. Josh, over to you with tight ends.
Sure. Thanks, guys. Again, Amr and I are we're pretty in sync today. I gotta say, most of his starts and sits, I kind of agree with.
That
So
time
I'll
of the
just
month,
add
huh?
a little in there. I love Eric Ebron this week, as I said earlier. I think everyone knows by now that Jack Doyle's on IR, so we don't have to worry about the low volume with Ebron anymore. Ebron used to be that guy that would only get 2 passes a game, but then those 2 passes would go for touchdowns, and you'd feel frustrated. But from this point onward, I think he's an easy set it and forget it tight end option. So we're going to start Eric Ebron. I like Jared Cook this week as well. As you mentioned, that matchup against the Chiefs, they struggle against tight ends. And I think Jared Cook is the only option in Oakland that I would want to start whatsoever. So give me Jared Cook to start at tight end. As for my tight end sits, I also agree. We're going to sit Jimmy Graham. It's a shame. He may be another case of shut him down for the rest of the year just due to the thumb injury. So much talent, great opportunity to play with Aaron Rodgers. I was really hoping that he would be back to the form that he showed in New Orleans years back with Drew Brees. Now, once again, playing with an elite level quarterback, but just hasn't been the case. So sit Jimmy Graham this week, probably for the rest of the year as well. You can't trust him in the playoffs with a broken thumb. I'm also going to sit Trey Burton. Yes, he hasn't reached double digits in the past 5 weeks. He's only hauled in more than 4 receptions once all year. His volume hasn't quite been what we hoped it would be either. He's been another one that, great situation, going to a new team. He was one of the first free agents signed during the offseason. Just hasn't quite translated. He's been up and down. He's had some really good weeks. And the landscape of tight end being what it is, I believe he's still overall in the year a top 10 tight end. He's too inconsistent for me. So I'm going to stay away from Trey Burton. And last but not least, Evan Ingram. Just at this point, I would even drop him. I wouldn't even roster him anymore.
Yeah, and I think he's still questionable to play or even doubtful to play as well.
Right.
But it shows the despair of the tight end position when Trey Burton is going to finish as a top 10 tight end, and I think he has like 8 points in the last 5 weeks combined. Rough.
Yeah.
As someone that owns him,
very tough.
rough. Yeah. So
I agree. I'm a Trey Burton owner as well.
If you're someone that has Travis Kelce or Zach Ertz, just be thankful that you don't have to worry about streaming tight ends every single week. If you're someone streaming, then yeah, it makes it challenging, and you look like a genius when you get that big hit. So defense, if you watch the show, we do it very quick, guys. Just give me two streamable defenses you like this week. Umar, we'll start with you.
Ryan, I like your Denver Broncos versus the Bengals. Jeff Driscoll starting at quarterback, so don't like it. And we already talked about it a lot, but the Ravens against the Falcons, they should do some damage. As far as sits, I don't like the Eagles or Redskins defenses. I think it's going to be very either high scoring or very low scoring. It's just not going to be a very good game. And I don't like the Chargers defense versus the Steelers. It's going to be very high scoring tonight.
Yeah, cool. Josh.
I'm going to start Tennessee against the Jets. As we said, their offense is terrible. Tennessee does have a good defense, even though they haven't been playing well as of late. I'm also going to start Kansas City against Oakland. As I said, the only player in Oakland I would want anything to do with would be Jared Cook. The rest of the offense is just awful. Kansas City's defense has been very bad, but, bad defense going against a bad offense. I think the defense could come through. They could probably get a couple turnovers. So start Kansas City defense. I'm going to sit New England. I think that that could be a high-scoring matchup, and as Umar said, I'm also going to sit Pittsburgh, and what I expect to be possibly a high-scoring matchup.
Yeah, and that Chiefs defense has gotten some turnovers, so that's always helpful. So, well, great. Well, let's get into some questions here. Unless you guys had any burning things you wanted to say before that.
No, let's hear what the people have to ask us.
Yeah, let's go to the people. Go to the people. All right, Josh, we'll start with you. All right. Needs 2 running backs and a flex. Okay, so asking for 3, and he's giving 5 names. So start 3 of these 5. Eckler, okay. Aaron Eckler, Spencer Ware, Tariq Cohen, Kenny Galladay, or Demaryius Thomas. If you need me to repeat them, let me know.
Nope, we're going to go Eckler, Ware, and Galladay.
Perfect. So sit Cohen and Thomas. I think I would agree with you 100% there. Okay. Umar, this is a tough one. All right. 0.5 PPR. Christian Kirk versus the Packers, or Curtis Samuel versus the Buccaneers?
That is a tough one. I probably go with Curtis Samuel actually. Christian Kirk is a deep threat guy more than a reception guy. That's where Larry Fitzgerald comes into play. And DJ Moore is more of a reception guy compared to Curtis Samuel. But yeah, just based on both of those options, I think Curtis Samuel may get more receptions than Christian Kirk in this situation.
Yeah, I love going through these questions because, we get some where it's wow, that guy has a loaded roster, like great options, and some where you're like, is this a 20-team league? Like these are the two you're debating
Exactly.
between. So, I mean, I don't even know if any of my leagues Curtis Samuel's rostered. So, I mean, that's
Yeah,
I like it
agreed.
though. That's great. But yeah, I do actually like him better than Christian Kirk as well, just because of that, as you mentioned. So, okay, Josh, Keenan Allen or David Johnson? I'm guessing this is for a flex position.
Uh, mm, Keenan Allen or David Johnson? Give me Keenan Allen. I mean, David Johnson he's another one who's been a little bit disappointing. He's been better, I think, and he'll be better since Byron Leftwich took over calling plays for that offense. But Keenan Allen's just been consistently good. He's really been great coming off the bye week, the second half of the season. Very similar to last year.
Mm-hmm.
And again, they've got a matchup where Melvin Gordon's out. They're definitely going to have to throw the ball. Give me Keenan Allen.
Yeah, and he's been productive as of late, getting a high volume as well. So, Ummer, here's I got I guess a two-part question, two different positions. So we'll start with the quarterback, Ben Roethlisberger or Russell Wilson.
I hate to say it, but Russell Wilson. I know they're fighting for a playoff spot, and they are hoping to stay in the division chase as well. But against the Niners, yeah, Russell Wilson likes to feast against the Niners. So yeah, compared to Big Ben against the Chargers, I like Russell Wilson.
Yeah, as a Wilson owner, it's been frustrating because I feel like every week at halftime he has like 3 to 7 points, and then luckily he saves face in like that fourth quarter, and they love to win games late and score some touchdowns late. So I think both are good options. We kind of
Yeah, I agree.
we kind of
I,
alluded to
I
that
agree.
Chargers Steelers game should be high scoring. You would think Ben would see the end zone more. I know last week he threw for like 400,000 yards, but he had one touchdown, so he only scored like not
Yeah.
only, but he scored like 22 points, which when you have 400 yards, you're expecting a little more. But yeah, either way, I think good. I do like Wilson just because of the matchup. Okay, tight end question for you: Brait or Jordan Reed?
In this situation, Cameron Brate, because as mentioned, Jordan Reed is questionable coming into the game. So I don't know if you'll play a little bit of the game and then go out. That'll be Vernon Davis's time to shine then. So in this case, Cameron Brate is healthy. Go against the Panthers. Yeah, Cameron Brate over Jordan Reed.
There you go. Josh, this is surprisingly a tougher question. When I first read it, I had my immediate answer, and then the more I thought about it, I was like, you know what? Maybe let's break it down a little bit. So for a flex
I'm
position,
intrigued.
yeah, flex position, Juju Smith-Schuster or Matt Breida.
I don't know. I don't think that's a tough question at all. Juju.
Love it. I was trying to build some suspense there, and okay.
Well, I thought about it for a second because I wanted to make sure I wasn't missing something. I was like, wait a minute, what? No, nope, yep, Juju.
Yeah. Well, that was my initial. Okay. All right. Well, there you go. That's why I'm the host. Spencer Ware or DJ. I'm guessing that means David Johnson, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard in fantasy circles. That's a good one. Um, I think I probably prefer Spencer Ware just based on that offense and how terrible the Oakland Raiders defense is. So yeah, in this case, I probably prefer Spencer Ware over David Johnson. Even though I think in that situation again, I think both options are pretty good.
Yeah, I think you're looking all right. Uh, DJ has looked much better since the offensive coordinator changed there in Arizona. Josh, Kenny Galladay or Brandon Cooks?
Oh boy. Well, you know, normally I would say Cooks here, but I mean, luckily they're in the same game, so I don't have to think about who's playing who there.
That's true.
But I do. But see, the problem is, I think it's possible that the Rams could just get up big early, and then in the second half, not have to throw the ball. And Stafford, I don't like Stafford this week, but I mean, who else is going to throw the ball to? No Marvin Jones, no Golden Tate. It's Galladay or bust essentially in that offense.
Hmm.
So I think I think in a standard, format, it's going to depend. It's going to be format dependent. Standard format, give me Cooks, and PPR, give me Galladay. I think Galladay catches more passes, but Cooks could end up with more yards.
Yeah, that is a tough question, especially when you dig past the surface. I think Talib is expected to play,
Right.
so the Rams get
Yes.
that
Yeah.
obviously that all-pro corner back. But as you mentioned, there's just no one else in that offense. I think Theo Riddick's going to have a decent day, catching passes out of the
Yeah.
backfield, which we saw a lot in the prior 2 years. We haven't really seen much this year, but I mean, I think we see that today. And then Kenny Galladay, I mean, what other receivers do you have? So just at a sheer
Right.
volume, I agree with you 100% standard. I think Cook still is going to get more yards and probably get a touchdown out of it. Galladay, I could see having 9 or 10 receptions for like 28 yards. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
those 9 or 10 receptions get you points in PPR. So,
That's
um,
true.
all right, Ummer,
Very true.
flex one, half point PPR. Sony
Yeah.
Michel, Tyler Boyd, or Josh Reynolds.
Hmm.
Intriguing one, right?
It is very intriguing. I think the fact that it's PPR, I would probably have to lean on Josh Reynolds in that situation. Like I said, with Jeff Driscoll, I'm not sure how that passing offense is going to look. So most likely he'll probably force feed AJ Green over Tyler Boyd. I know Tyler Boyd has had a great season this year, but yeah, with Jeff Driscoll, I think he'll rely on who the main guy is in that offense. So that'll be AJ Green. Um, and with who's a running back that you mentioned? Sonny Michel, right?
Yeah.
He's more of a running guy than a receiving guy, so that's where James White gets his work done. So I don't think he'll get many receptions. So in this case, I prefer Josh Reynolds out of those three.
Okay. Um, Josh, Kenyon Drake, or as I just mentioned, Theo Riddick.
Oh boy. I'm gonna go. That's a tough one. I'm gonna go with Theo Riddick actually. Surprisingly,
Oh,
because Carry Johnson's out, and we talked about LeGarrette Blunt's not going to catch the ball.
Yeah.
So we've got Galladay, and we've got Theo Riddick, and we've got
Yeah.
that's
Insert
it.
insert
No one
name
else,
here.
right?
Insert name here.
Right. So I believe Bruce Ellington is the slot receiver there now. So I mean, he's someone who could pick up a couple targets, but he's not going to win the game for you. So I don't think they're going to be going to him in the fourth quarter when they're behind and they're trying to play catch up. I think Stafford's going to be under pressure from Donald and Ndamukong Suh, and I think he's going to have to dump the ball off, and he's going to dump the ball off to Theo Riddick. So PPR format, give me Theo Riddick. Standard format though. No, give me Theo Riddick.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. And we've seen in past weeks, obviously, a little different because they're juggernaut offenses. But if we look at the Chiefs game and the Saints game, Kareem Hunt when he was there, Alvin Kamara caught a lot of passes out of the backfield against that Rams defense. So I think Riddick also is a good option there. Okay, Ummer, we'll do a few more, then we'll move on. This is a tough one too. Pick one. I'm going to give you four names.
okay.
Point 0.5 PPR. Nick
All right.
Chubb versus the Texans, Joe Mixon versus the Broncos, Aaron Eckler versus Steelers, or Spencer Ware versus the Raiders.
Point by PPR,
This guy,
Mixon,
this guy was busy
Eckler,
on the waiver wire
Chubb.
this week.
Mixon, Eckler. Part of me wants to say Mixon, actually. I know the Denver Broncos have actually been good against running backs, but I think because Jeff Driscoll may have to check down a little bit more option, this is where Joe Mixon will get a lot of those receptions, and then also throw in the fact that he's the main running back as well. So um, I'd probably have to go with either Mixon or Eckler in that situation. Yeah, surprisingly, I think I might actually pick Mixon.
All right, taking Mixon. I would probably be different, but you're the expert, not me. Um, okay, a couple more here. Josh, standard scoring, pick three. There's five names here. Chris
Okay.
Carson, Spencer Ware, or four names, excuse me. Chris Carson, Spencer Ware, Robert Woods, or Adrian Peterson. So basically, pick one you're not starting.
Yep. Sit AP.
Yep, that's an
That was
easy.
easy.
I think
That
that's
was
an
that
easy
was
one.
easy, yeah.
That's okay. All right, Adam Humphries versus the Panthers or Allen Robinson versus the Giants? Standard scoring.
Standard scoring. Okay, that plays a big difference then.
Yeah.
I would probably have to say, oh, that one's tough. Because Allen Robinson, I think, may get more involvement, but Adam Humphries will get that touchdown, I think, possibly. So in a standard league, I'd probably have to lean on Adam Humphries more than Allen Robinson because Allen Robinson has also been very inconsistent. He has these amazing weeks, then he has absolute dud weeks. So Adam Humphries has been more consistent, especially over the last few weeks. So in this case, I'd probably like Adam Humphries.
Yeah, the consistency is huge. I'm in a league where we are in a giant group text, all of us, and one of the Allen Robinson's owners, I feel like every other week texted, Robinson get injured or just not getting targeted? And it's usually just not getting targeted. So,
Yeah.
all right, we'll do
Yeah.
one more each here. So, Josh, pick one, PPR. Chris Thompson, Spencer Ware, or Dion Lewis?
Spencer Ware, love him. Love the situation. Nothing against Chris Thompson or Dion Lewis. I just think Spencer Ware, especially going against Oakland. I mean, they could be playing any team in the league, and I would love Spencer Ware's situation. But going against the Oakland defense, I think he's an easy start. Honestly, there's only like 5 or 6 guys I would start over him. So the answer is almost always, if you have to ask, like if you have one of those guys, you're not asking. If you have Gurley, if you have Christian McCaffrey, if you have a guy like that, you're not asking the question. So if you're asking the question, Spencer Ware.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, last one, and this is kind of a fun one actually. A little different format.
All right.
So standard league, but extra
Okay.
points for punt return yards. Or I'm assuming
Oh,
just
all right.
return yards in general. Both these are punt returners though.
Right.
Tariq Cohen
Okay.
or Tyler Lockett?
Tyler Lockett. Okay. Um, that one's tough. I probably have to go with Tyler Lockett in that situation, more because of just his receiving ability. So yeah, he'll get some additional points, obviously, for the return yards, but just the fact that he'll be able to do damage just in the passing game in general, yeah, that's the reason I like Lockett more than Cohen.
All right. Well, there you have it, Tyler Lockett. Gentlemen, great show as always. Anything you want to add before we get to kickoff here?
Nope. Feel like we covered most things. Just if you're the Stephon Diggs owner, monitor his health situation. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, exactly. Back to questionable. I think he'll be a go, but who knows how limited or whatnot he will be.
Right.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. If you haven't already, click that subscribe button to our YouTube channel if you're watching on YouTube. We're going to be adding a bunch of content over the next few months. We're going to be doing fantasy stuff, NFL draft stuff, have a few exciting kind of just different shows, actually, that we're going to be doing. So make sure to stay tuned for that. If you haven't subscribed to sportsaldente.com, please do that as well. Helps all of us out here, and we get you your West Coast sports content. Gentlemen, thanks so much. Enjoy your Sundays. Good luck on those fringe games that you have for fantasy. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm on the fringe in all 3 leagues, so it's going to be I might not have any fingernails left after today.
Watch that Red Zone channel with anticipation. For sure.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and my Broncos have a morning game this week, so I got to get them out of the way early. So
There you go.
yeah, I don't have to wait
There you go.
around. So, fellas, well, thanks so much. Enjoy your Sundays, all right? And everyone, thanks for tuning in, and good luck this week in fantasy.
Best of luck.
As always, guys.